Hello everyone, Mr. Lipschick here, and our discussion for this segment is economic growth. So what is economic growth? Generally speaking, economic growth is an improvement in the quality of life and living standard of a population through material progress. The U.S. has grown rapidly over our history, and the poorest Americans are much more prosperous than the average individual hundreds of years ago. How do you measure economic growth? The most basic measure of economic growth is the percentage change in real GDP over time. Current GDP minus GDP of the previous year divided by GDP of the previous year times 100 is the percent change in GDP. If this number is positive, the economy grew over time. GDP and population growth. In order for a country to maintain its level of prosperity, its GDP growth must keep pace with population growth. To measure this, economists use real GDP per capita. And this is real GDP divided by the population. If the GDP per capita continues to rise, so will the standard of living. While real GDP per capita tells us the average output consumed by each person in the population, it does not tell us how wealth is distributed. That is a weakness of this measure. A country can have a very large GDP per capita, but this is only an average. It is possible for a nation to have a large GDP per capita, but with uneven distribution among the population, that is very few people and many poor people. Okay, that situation does exist in some countries. Productivity and deepening. A country's productivity will determine its standard of living. Productivity can be increased through a process called capital deepening. Capital deepening is the process of increasing the amount of capital per worker. Capital referring to the man-made tools for production. A workforce of a given size will become more productive if given more capital. And demand for workers and wages will both increase as a result. Types of capital deepening. Capital deepening can occur through an increase in physical capital or human capital. Physical capital is defined as buildings, machines, and tools used by workers. Human capital is the education, experience, skills, and training of the workforce that expands productive capacity. Savings, investment, and economic growth. Savings is defined as income not used for consumption. Income that is not used for consumption is reinvested through savings accounts and other assets into businesses that create output. The savings rate is the portion of disposable income that is saved. If the overall savings rate for an economy is high, then a large amount of capital will exist for private investment. Private investment will lead to economic growth. As the U.S. economy has a poor savings rate, businesses have often gone to foreign borrowers. Government and economic growth. Government can impact capital deepening. If taxes raised are spent on consumption, expenses such as war, there will be reduced investment and reduced capital deepening. If the government spends in areas that increase productivity, such as roads, science, technology, and education, there is an increase in capital deepening. Foreign trade and growth. A trade deficit exists when the value of imports exceeds that of its exports. And this can help economic growth in the long term in some circumstances. If the imported goods include physical capital, it will make the country more productive in the long term through capital deepening. During the 1800s, the U.S. had a trade deficit and large debts owed to Great Britain. Most of our factories and railroads and infrastructure were built with British capital. During World War I, our productive capacity had grown to such an extent that we provided England and France with most of their war material. By the end of the Great War, Britain was in debt to the United States. Technology and growth. An important source of economic growth is technological progress. Technological progress is an increase in efficiency gained by producing more output without using more inputs. Technological development creates increased efficiency, which leads to greater productivity. Robert Solow, winner of the Nobel Prize in economics, developed a method to measure technological progress. He measured how much growth in GDP over time occurred due to increases in capital and because of increases in labor. Any remaining growth, he theorized, must have come from technological progress. Economist Edward Denison estimated the growth due to technological progress between 1929 and 1982. The average GDP growth rate for this period was 2.92%. The average real GDP growth rate due to increases in capital was 0.56%. And the average real GDP growth rate due to increases in labor was 1.3%. And from this, he was able to deduce that the average growth rate due to technological progress was, the average in real GDP was 1.02%, which is pretty significant. Causes of technological progress. Scientific research is an important cause of technological progress. From scientific research, we gain improved production techniques and improved physical capital. These improvements result in superior goods and services. Innovation is another source of technological growth. New products and ideas come into the market, increasing GDP and profits. Patents, the exclusive right to sell a product for 20 years, are issued by the government to protect a company or investor's product from copying. This allows them to make up their research costs through exclusive sales and marketing. The scale of an economic market also influences innovation. Large markets create greater incentives for innovation because of the greater potential for profits. Large economies, such as that of the U.S., come up with more technological advances as a result. Education and experience create technological progress. Educated and experienced workers can both use the latest technology and create new technologies. High education corresponds with technological advancement in countries. The U.S. has the greatest number of high school and college graduates in the world. Increased uses of natural resources can create a need for new technology. Previously useless materials can be converted into usable resources. It allows an economy to obtain and use new resources, discover new reserves, and use resources more efficiently. the right you see a chair, which has been created using a special type of fungus. That concludes our discussion on economic growth. Thank you for viewing, and I look forward to seeing you in the live lesson. Have a great day.